Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of In the Pit with Lobo Tigre. Our victim of the day is Hugh Stuart. He's the CEO of Montage Gold. Now, before we get into my Q&A and hand it over to Stuart, I just want to remind everybody, if you find value in these interviews, please do click subscribe. My CIO is training me to say this, so if you find value in this, please go ahead, subscribe, share, spread the word. We try hard to get useful information out to you. Anyway, Hugh and Montage are working on gold projects in Côte d'Ivoire, West Africa. Hugh, why and what's going on? Give us an overview of what you're up to, please.
Yeah, Ivory Coast in West Africa is, for me, who spent most of his career in Africa and especially in West Africa, is probably the most prospective country in West Africa. It's a place I've been involved now for about 10 years. In fact, going back to the start of this project that we're going to talk about today. I think it's the most prospective country. It has the right rocks, but importantly, it's probably the least explored country in West Africa. So that's really why it's taken us a long time to get back into it. And it's quite a long story for a relatively new project. But finally, we have everything we wanted to get into the right vehicle. We're funded and we're able to sort of move forward. And I think Ivory Coast is probably one of the countries that's going to start coming up on people's radar an awful lot more in the next few years.
So actually, let me jump on that for a moment. Why is it underexplored? I remember before the great Laurent Gbagbo catastrophe, it seemed to be kind of a poster child of stable Africa. Everything was, there weren't coups for a long time. It seemed medically more stable. And there were other companies operating there. So after that, there's been a little bit more volatility, just a bit. But I would have thought that it would be pretty well, kicked over the same way Ghana would be or Mali or whatever.
No, I think back probably in the 90s, it was really the poster child for West Africa. It was Abidjan was the place in West Africa where people wanted to be based. I think sort of late 90s, early 2000s, there was a bit of political instability. Obviously, Gbagbo came in the early 2000s. There was a little bit more stability during that period. But really, that sort of critical phase where the last couple of cycles ago, the late 90s, 2000s, there really wasn't a lot of exploration because of that. A couple of civil wars, obviously in 2010. I mean, we started working there in 2008. In 2010, it obviously went pear-shaped again for a couple of years. But I think it's a combination of that sort of that instability which really put a lot of people off. The way mines, put into production, there was discoveries made, particularly Tongon and probably the ITP mine, but they never really reached their full potential at that time. But when you sort of fast forward to sort of the last few years, probably post 2012 when President Ouattara took over, we are seeing now a very much more stable country. We've just gone through elections at the end of October last year. But the hangover from that earlier period is that you can still find permits that haven't been explored. When we got onto the Morondo gold permit where we're going to talk today, back in 2009, that permit hadn't been touched by previous exploration. So there's still permits out there, still other permits within our portfolio that were still to be granted, and as new permits coming through that haven't been touched by modern exploration. And for me, that's one of the key aspects. It's just far easier to find something if nobody's been there before.
Well, I hadn't really thought about it until you framed it just that way. But if the last war was in 2010, A, that's a while ago, but B, that would have been sort of right in the middle after the crash of 2008 when prices were rising and everybody was all excited about gold. If at that time when money was flowing into the sector, Côte d'Ivoire was off the map because of political unrest, then it would have skipped that part of the cycle.
Exactly, and you see a lot of the, during that period, a lot of the expansion, the exploration of Burkina Faso and Mali, a lot of those mines that went into production in the last 5 years in Burkina, for example, were discovered during that period. So it was easier for people to go somewhere else. And obviously that political risk is a factor in Africa. And if a country is demonstrating the stability that people want, people will go there because it's simply easier to get investment and to work.
Okay. Well, one more question on this. I don't want to beat that to death, but your company is sort of, in my mind, Redback 2.0. Redback was a big win for me back in my Casey research days. We got in early, big success building the Chirano mine and the Lundin involvement and so on. And there are key Redback people involved in your company now, including yourself. In fact, we've been discussing off camera, and we may have met 15 years ago in Ghana. But
exactly.
if, given that that's part of the story, why not Ghana? I understand that maybe Côte d'Ivoire is less picked over, but with all that history, you've got to know, a lot of targets in Ghana that are still available. Not everything Redback had is a mine today. Why not?
Right.
Why not go there? Why not go back to Ghana where Redback had its roots?
It's a good question, and this story, as I said, in terms of the deposit and what we're doing at the moment in Côte d'Ivoire, it's a relatively new story, but it does actually go all the way back to 2008, and Montage is really probably Redback 3 almost. So we were working in obviously for Redback. I was running the exploration for them. We were drilling obviously a lot of holes in Tasiast and Chirano at the time. And myself and a guy called Norm Bailey, who was running the exploration on the ground at Tasiast, decided we wanted a bit of latitude to go and look somewhere else in West Africa and do some early stage exploration. And obviously things were going quite nicely, so they gave us a bit of a budget. And we looked at the whole of West Africa. We did a structural study, just the two of us, but we really came up with that northern or northwestern part of Côte d'Ivoire as the place we'd like to go. So a lot of these permits that you're seeing today in the Montage portfolio actually have their roots back in 2008, 2009, when we first pegged that ground in Redback. Obviously, in 2010, we got taken out. They went into Kinross. We went off. And for the last probably 7 or 8 years, Rick and Kevin and I have been working in Sudan. We've got a discovery on the Block 14 project in Sudan in the company called Orca Gold. And back in 2016, 2017, obviously Sudan is, the whole Orca story is tied up to the politics of Sudan, which is really starting to come good now. But we wanted to diversify a little bit of that risk, so we eventually managed to buy those projects in Côte d'Ivoire back from Kinross into Orca. So 2017 as Orca, we got the permit package back. And the reason I was focused on that was back in 2010, just before the takeout, we actually drilled a few holes on some trenching and a nice soil anomaly at the Morondo Gold project. And we intersected low-grade mineralization over significant widths. But it was never followed up. It had just been sitting there in the ground. We had another vehicle back in 2013 that did a little bit of work on it, but then went off and did something else. So this project's really been sitting there. It started off in Redback, then it went into something else, then it came back into Orca. And obviously, sitting in Orca, it was never getting any value. Orca is really tied to the politics of Sudan, despite the fact that we've got probably one of the better undeveloped gold projects in Africa at the moment.
So Montage was a spin out from Orca. And
so we decided to spin the Ivorian stuff out. And why not Ghana? I think I'd go back to that point of prospectivity. I think Ghana has been heavily explored. There aren't so many discoveries. You see a few stories coming out at the moment, people like Newcore, but they're generally older discoveries that are sort of still being worked on. Whereas in Côte d'Ivoire over the last few years, you're seeing fresh discoveries. Endeavour at Fetekro, Tieto at Abuja, obviously Rocks Gold and previously Newcrest at Segella. So you're seeing brand new discoveries coming up, and I think they're the next round of mines that are going to get built in West Africa. And I think that exploration sort of focus in Côte d'Ivoire is going to continue simply because it hasn't been looked at as much. And it's a nice place to work to boot.
Okay, fair enough. I understand. Though, if an opportunity came up in another country, you have experience beyond, if something came up and knocked on the door, hey, we got a project, would you limit yourself to Côte d'Ivoire, or would you consider something there?
I think the key aspect of junior companies is you've got to stay focused on what's important, where you're really going to generate the value. But having said that, never say never. If you see something does come across your desk that does sort of grab you, then absolutely yes.
I mean, you were talking about Endeavour. That started out in multi-jurisdictional, and they bolted on more in other countries, and that hasn't seemed to stop them. And the reason why I ask is just because, diversification of political risk is never a bad thing. I mean, I guess if you have to open an office in another country, it adds to your overhead and so on. But I just worry, okay, let's say everything that you presented about Côte d'Ivoire makes it the cat's meow now.
Yep.
But if things go south for some reason and you're all have all your eggs in that one basket,
No, yeah, I can see what you mean. Definitely. I think it is always something that's in the back of your mind. You look at Burkina Faso and what's happened there over the last few years in terms of the Islamic insurrection in the north coming out of Mali. It can happen. It has happened in the past. It's the reason Orca went into the project in the first place. But I think the main thing is, you've got to keep an open mind, but it has to be for the right reasons. It has to be for the right asset. Going into another country to do grassroots exploration, I think would not be sensible. But if a significant project did come our way, that we could see a way of really advancing it, then we'd certainly look at it, definitely.
All right. Okay, well, let's talk about the projects you do have now. Your flagship project there, you have 1.5 million ounces at almost a gram. Give us an overview of why this is exciting, why it works. What do you hope to show the market this year?
So the Morondo project and the Koné resource, as you said, it's standing at about 1.5 million ounces at the moment, a grade of 0.9 at a 0.5 cutoff. That was drilled out back in 2018 by Orca. Obviously, we brought it into Montage as a private company 2019, and we drilled probably about 6,000 to 7,000 meters over the first half of 2020, and obviously got to the point where we decided to take the company public. And there's really two reasons for making that decision to take it public. On the face of it, Koné is a low-grade resource, obviously 0.9 grams at a 0.5 cutoff. But it has a whole bunch of other factors. I mean, I think one of the things that people forget in exploration is that finding gold deposits is hard, obviously, but actually turning a gold deposit into a mine is probably even harder, because there's so many different aspects that go into completing that process. And I think the thing that attracts me to Koné is that whilst the grade is low, it has a whole series of those other sort of attributes that make it work and make it into a development project. And in the same way that we did it, Redback and Orca, is over the last sort of couple of years, sort of while we were doing that resource, we've done a lot of work in the background in terms of engineering studies internally, understanding what this project could be. We thought that the mineralization, which is remarkably wide for a deposit, a sort of mesothermal shear zone hosted gold deposit. Now we're looking at true widths, probably averaging about 200 meters, pretty much mineralized wall to wall. So it has a bunch of these attributes which make it a good development project, which, in my view, mitigate some of that those low grade issues. So it's very wide. Metallurgically, it's very clean. It's not a heap leach. The bulk of the resource is fresh. But before we even drilled out that resource,
sorry, Stuart. Sorry, Hugh. Let me jump in and just make sure the audience cottons on the significance of that. We're used to hearing about heap leach oxide gold projects, and those can work at a gram or less, half a gram. This is, and you got ahead of me on my questions there. I was going to ask about that because I saw the resource, and like 90% of it is in fresh rock, not oxides. Very little transition even. So it's not going to heap leach, or probably not. I mean, it's going to need more intensive processing. So I guess a way of putting this, because I know you're working on a preliminary assessment, so you can't tell me what the PEA numbers are going to be. Maybe you could say if you have a corporate goal for some of those numbers, or how does this work? I mean, you've got fresh rock. Yes, it's wide, but it goes down into the ground. Only so much is going to fit in a pit, and it's going to need more intensive process or more typically expensive processing. So what are these benefits that counteract that?
I think the first thing is the width of the ore body and the homogeneity of the grade within that ore body, which means you can, if you're looking at it, it's dipping at about 45 degrees.
Conveniently the angle of a pit wall.
Which is conveniently the angle of the pit wall. So immediately you're looking at a relatively low strip ratio, which means you have to mine less waste, which obviously you reduce the cost. So when you're looking at a 200 meter wide, 45 degree dipping ore body, in terms of mining cost, is far lower than a 20 meter wide 6 gram ore body, which is vertical. because you simply got to mine less material to get it out. We're about 20 kilometers from the national grid, so we can access grid power, probably at a cost of about 12 or 13 cents per kilowatt hour, which is obviously crucial in terms of reducing capex. You don't have to build your own power station to power the project.
I thought I saw a power line on your map. Is that a hypothetical power line?
On one of the slides up to the northwest, so we can tap into that, and obviously that reduces the process cost. And if you reduce the process cost, which is also helped by the fact that the rock is fairly soft as well, the bond index, which is a measure of the amount of electricity or amount of power which is required to grind a rock to get the gold out, is relatively low, probably one of the lowest you'll see at around 10 or 11.
And that's true at depth as well?
Say again?
That's true at depth as well?
It goes up a little bit. The variability work that we're doing at the moment is going up a little bit, probably sort of 12, 13 at depth, but it doesn't change significantly. So those
and why is that? Is it because the shear zone has mushed up the rock, or why is that?
Mainly because the alteration or the alteration of the rock that accompanies the gold mineralization is not silica based. It's a biotite alteration system.
Okay. No.
So the rock hasn't been. So it's pretty competent. It's going to hold up nicely in terms of the angle of those pit walls. So the sort of sum of all those things is you get a low process cost. Because of the grade, we'll go for a high throughput mill. It needs a large scale mill to be able to make sense of it. But when you start running those numbers, you get a low process cost, which means your cutoff grade goes down, which means your strip ratio goes down even further. And obviously coupled with the fact that we can probably mine at a slightly higher grade for the first probably 6, 7, 8 years of the mine life, which is something we're working on at the moment. You can actually start to see, given the size of plant you need, you can start to see a project that is actually pretty economic and is very worthwhile, but also is going to produce a significant amount of gold. So in terms of what we're looking for from the PEA, and obviously our plan is to take that from a PEA, which will be, in all intents and purposes, a PFS, although the only reason it's going to be called a PEA is because the resource at this stage will be inferred. We're going to take that all the way through to feasibility study by the end of this year.
Full feasibility by the end of this year?
Exactly. That's the plan. A lot of this, as I said, we've been doing a lot of work in the background. We pretty much completed an internal PEA using the same consultants that we're using now, like Lycopodium, Knight Pisold, SRK, about 2 years ago. So we've got a very good idea of where we're trying to get to. I think that's the key to a lot of the way we work, and this goes back to the redback time, is understanding sort of early in the resource development process where you actually want to get to, what you naturally need to get to be able to turn that discovery into a mine. So what we're looking at the moment will be a large-scale process plant, probably in excess of 8 to 10 million tons per annum, somewhere in that range. We're doing that work at the moment. Accessing grid power, probably with a reserve somewhere in the range. The target for the PEA will be an in-pit resource, because we can't call it a reserve, somewhere in the range of 3.1 to 3.5 million ounces. From a resource where we're targeting to get as close as possible to 3 million ounces at the 0.5 cutoff. But something that's then, based on those metrics, especially mining in the early years with a higher cutoff grade, so you stockpile a little bit of the lower grade material to allow yourself to put in some of the higher grade material to the plant earlier, which obviously improves your economics. So something that's got a significant NPV, a good IRR, but it's going to produce probably in the range well in excess of 250,000 ounces a year. So
understood, which begins to make it more interesting as a takeover target. But so will there be a new resource estimate then that comes out with the PEA? You've done some drilling since the Orca days, right?
Yeah, we've completed about another 20,000 meters. I mean, the thing with this resource, that initial 1.5 million ounce resource was only based on about 18,000 meters of drilling because of simply the geometry and the width of the ore body. We've completed about another 22,000 meters since then. We'll be putting some of those intercepts out and a bit of an update in the next couple of weeks. But that data, I literally have got the last assays from that program in about an hour ago, so that will go across to the resource consultant. And we'll be putting a new resource out by the end of this month, and that obviously will feed into the PEA by the end of the quarter. So a lot of that other stuff, metallurgy, is probably about 60% complete. All the geotech drilling's done, the hydrological work is done, and the environmental work is ramping up, especially in the next couple of months. So all feeding into that PEA, as I said, in terms of the nature of the metallurgical test work, the geotech work, and other aspects of it, it'll be pretty much done. It will be done to PFS standards, which will then allow us to move directly onto the feasibility study.
Right. Okay. And just to be clear, there's no nasties in there. It's not refractory. It's just
no.
Fresh,
I mean,
grind and float.
The original test work, as I said, one of the things, there was no point us drilling that resource off back in 2018 if it didn't leach, if the fresh rock didn't leach pretty well. So that initial test work gave us just around 90% from the fresh rock, just over. The current work that's going on is generally confirming that, and we're just about to run about 40 variability samples. We've optimized the process now, so we'll run those variability samples through that process over the next few weeks, and hopefully, probably in 3-4 weeks, we'll be ready. We'll put a metallurgical update out to sort of complement the resource. So it's very easy milling. As I said, it's not particularly hard. So it's going back to what I was saying, I probably hammered this point a bit too hard, but it's, if you've got that grade, the other things have to work. And I think one of the things here is it is a very simple ore body. It's in terms of the geometry, in some ways it has the geometry of a porphyry. It's 250 meters wide. The bulk of it is 600 to 700 meters long, and it goes down to about 450 meters in depth as we've drilled it so far. So it's that simplicity that actually allows it to work at those sorts of grades.
Understood. And are we exploring at the same time, or is it pretty much it is what it is and we're trying to prove it up?
We haven't done a lot of exploration around it. We've been once we got the IPO done at the end of October, we raised some money. We've obviously raised about $35 million, which was good. We were well oversubscribed, given it was a low-grade ore body in a country with an election coming up, which was very satisfying. But then we have some very supportive, well-known shareholders that make life in that regard quite easy. But yeah, we haven't done a great deal because we've been focused on getting that resource drilling done. But over the next few months, we'll start exploring. There's a couple of other targets. One called Petit Yao, which is about 7 kilometers away. There's a nice soil anomaly. We drilled a couple of holes on it, shallow RC holes, about 18 months ago, and got some thinner but decent grade intercepts. So we'll follow up on that, and we also have some other permit applications within a sort of sphere of influence of Koné, which we're pushing to get granted at the moment. And should they be granted, we'll definitely start to explore on those permits as well.
But you have other projects in the company as well, too, right?
Yeah, we've got some ground, and we hold 2 permits covering about 700 square kilometers up close to the Barracks Tongon mine, effectively running down the eastern edge of their mining lease. So we have some guys up there just before Christmas. They're going back this week to do some more reconnaissance work up there. We've just got a new license granted. And as I said, this is a permit that has just been granted. I can't find any record of previous exploration on that permit, and it's sitting within 20 kilometers of a mine site. So we'll be looking at that. And then we've got another project across on the southern extension of the Houndé belt, which is the main productive belt coming out of Burkina Faso. And that's had some drilling on. When we created Montage, we merged it with another private company that was funded by some of the backers by Sandstorm Gold royalties. So that was the main project in Côte d'Ivoire that they had. So we will be, there's a bunch of work to do on that, which we'll be expanding. We're running nicely under budget on the first part of the drill program, so it allows us to go off and do some more drilling on some of these other projects over the next few months.
All right, so just to kind of get a feel for how much is going to be done, obviously if you're going full steam ahead towards full feasibility, on the main project, that gets the lion's share. But how much of your budget this year is going to go into exploration versus project development?
The total budget for Côte d'Ivoire for the period from the IPO to the end of next year was about $22 million Canadian. Probably 20 of that is earmarked for the drilling and the development of Koné itself. So there's probably a couple of $1 million worth of exploration that we hope to do on those other projects. However, I think one of the keys here is, exploration changes. If we do recon work and we do some shallow drilling and we get some hits, then budgets change.
Well, strategically, I would also just say, I'm not telling you how to do your job, but if you have PEA numbers that are as good as it seems that you seem confident they will be, you're kind of in a no-lose situation. You go poke some holes in other projects and they come out completely dry. Nobody's going to care if the main project has a high margin. So you have a window of opportunity here where it's safe to test those other targets.
Exactly. No, so we will be doing that. And I think the other aspect we'd like to try and do over the course of this year is to consolidate a bit of the ground around us. I think once you demonstrate that Koné is a significant project in its own right, it very much becomes a center of gravity. So if we can pull in some of the permits held by other companies within a reasonable radius, and in that part of the world, I think you can truck anything up to probably 60, 70 kilometers, then you open yourself up to a lot of exploration upside as well. So that's probably the second part of the strategy that we'll work on as we go through this year.
All right. Well, so speaking of Koné, then I was wondering, looking at the sections, it seems like in some of the areas anyway, there are higher grades at depth. Not high grade, but higher. 1.5 grams, 2 grams.
It's an odd deposit there. High grade at Koné is sort of 1.2. But no, there are higher grade, there are shallower, higher grade features within the ore body, as you see in any gold ore body.
Well, my question specifically is: are there actually any narrow high grade? Like, is there potentially an underground mining scenario after the pit? Because all that gold came from somewhere, and it didn't fall from the sky.
No, exactly, and there's a lot of gold and a lot of alteration that's gone into it. If you look at the drill plan, we really haven't stepped far away from the actual resource. We've been drilling at depth. We drilled the northern extension over the last few months, going up to the permit boundary. We've traced the diorite, the host rock, all the way up there. Not to the same width and extent that we're seeing in the main part of the ore body. But as we saw at Tasiast and Chirano, the best place to find a gold deposit is next to a gold deposit, right? So this is a project that's only had 40,000 meters of drilling in it, and we're looking at an inferred resource in the region of 3 million ounces, we hope. In terms of what you'd normally see in terms of the number of meters,
you should wave your arms when you say that. 3 million ounces, it's this big.
And as well, we keep saying it when you do all those sort of 40 Zoom calls in a week and in a meeting, it all starts to get a bit unreal. But no, that's the target. We hope our target for this resource is to get it into that range, because it delivers the sort of in-pit resource. And we are drilling. We run optimizations on hypothetical resources, as we used to do back in the Tasiast days, to understand, there's no point drilling a hole at depth if a pit can't take it. So very much all of our drilling is, probably 90% of the holes that we've drilled.
Unless there's a phase 2 or different. I mean, Oyu Tolgoi, right? Yeah. You've got an underground now that's.
Well, the point is that this is, despite everything, this is it's, as we've been saying, it's a long story. It's an old story, but it's still a very under-drilled ore body. So yes, is there a feeder system? Very possibly. Is there some change in the strike? Change in the strike or the orientation of the mineralization, which gives you a higher grade, suddenly changes the grade and tightens things up? Very possibly. It's until you really have the time and the drilling to be able to really cover the whole thing, you're never really going to know that. And it's by doing that systematic sort of drilling work as you go through this process, which hopefully will bring some of that type of stuff out.
And of course, that's risky. I mean, it sounds like you've got a bird in a hand. So I'm not trying to distract you from that. I'm not trying to tell you to do anything other than what it sounds like you're focused on. That sounds quite right to me. I would absolutely put priority on the bird in the hand, proving up what you have, and then as a natural consequence of advancing that, you're going to learn more about the mineralization as you go. So, but it's just interesting. I was just noticing that there weren't any deep holes of what's underneath there, or where did this come from, and it's wondering if that was on the agenda.
We actually did that. We asked the guys on site, what is your Marilla hole? Marilla is a deposit in Mali. When I think Randgold or somebody, BHP had drilled it, and Randgold or whoever came back afterwards, so said, okay, well, let's just step back. Let's just step back and drill a hole like way out there. And they did. And the whole ore body, which was going vertical, suddenly shallowed, and they found the big one at the bottom. So we said to the guys, what is your Marilla hole? Where's the Marilla hole? So we kind of drilled those, and we're now putting those into a pit. Because we last year, the first 6 months of last year, we really stepped out 200-300 meters down dip of what we had of that resource to prove that resource extension was feasible. I mean, that's why we're reasonably confident in our numbers, because a lot of that deeper step out drilling was successful, which again was the catalyst to go public. But no, we'll be drilling some more speculative holes, because that's, in terms of exploration, that's where the fun is. The guys are drilling infill now, which is pretty tedious. So if you get to drill some exploration holes around the side, that's where it gets a lot more. It gets a lot more interesting. You can have a couple of beers on it and see what happens.
All right. So it sounds like you're fully funded for a pretty aggressive agenda for this year, and then beyond that, depending on the results, if they're as good as you seem to think, raising more money won't be a problem. You've pretty much answered most of my questions. I just have one more for you. I always ask everybody. You've told us a good story. It sounds pretty interesting. You want us to invest our hard-earned money into your stock. How much of your own money have you put into this, Hugh?
I own about just under around 300,000 shares in Montage. So I've put a couple of $100,000. I think the board and management, most of that, we did a fundraising in August 2019 as a private company at 45 cents. And obviously we've just raised the 35 million at $1.10. So pretty much all of the board and management have put into that at those sorts of prices. There are some of the longer term shareholders from the Sandstorm private company that probably get it a little bit lower than that, but in general, most of us are working at those sorts of prices. But no, it's important. I think, I mean, how can I ask somebody else to invest if I haven't put my own money into it? It would be a very quick answer, right?
Yes, it would. No, I appreciate you letting us know. I appreciate to know that you have skin in the game. And it's good to know that insiders bought into the financing, have skin in the game. You're all in the money, I guess, right now. But looking at Canadian Insider, I see only insider buying and no selling. So that gives me some confidence there.
No, we've got obviously a strong, base. Rick Clark, who's, we also have, I suppose we also have some shareholding through our shareholding in Orca as well, because Orca owns 30% of Montage. But no, we've got the president's list on the financing was pretty well filled, a significant part of that financing. So yeah, we do have some strong backers there, which is great.
Excellent. Okay. Well, that covers most of my questions. Any last point? I'll give you the last word, since you've been a good sport about some tough questions.
No, I think it's good. I mean, for me, it's obviously satisfying. As I said, it's a relatively new story, but this is a permit Norm and I pegged 12 years ago, and we finally got it. We finally got this package in a great place to work, into a place well funded that we can actually do some serious damage for the first time really since we started. So it's I'm looking forward to the next couple of years in Côte d'Ivoire. It's good.
Very good. Well, good luck, and keep us posted on the results. We'll be very interested to know how it comes out.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me into the pit. I was a bit worried when you say the next victim, but that was okay.
Very good. All right. Have a great one.
All right. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you for watching this edition of In the Pit with Lobo Tigre. If you enjoyed or found value in what you just saw, and you're watching this on any sort of social media, please do hit the like button and the share link. Send this on to anybody you think might be interested. That helps us out a lot. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do hit the subscribe button as well. The number of subscribers helps us get more valuable content to you as well. On the subject of subscribing, I'll quickly say that if you're not a subscriber to our free weekly Speculators Digest, I encourage you to sign up. I promise if you do, we will not send you a flood of daily advertisements. You get one free weekly digest with original research not published anywhere else. Check it out at independentspeculator.com. Thank you and have a great day.